So as was mentioned, my name is Bill Lucey. I'm the Long Island Soundkeeper, and I work for Save the Sound. The Soundkeeper title is part of the Waterkeeper Alliance, and that's actually a global organization with 40 countries involved now, with over 350 organizations, and we all work in our own regional way, like I do with Save the Sound, to address water pollution primarily. So a little bit more about Save the Sound. We're not a national group, we're regional, and we focus on the lands and waters that encompass Long Island Sound. So the watershed, the rivers, and the sound itself. We address a wide range of issues from climate change. We do a lot of land protection. We protected over 18,000 acres during our 40-year history. We're currently working on Plum Island, and we actually just were part of preserving another 70 acres in Greenwich last week, helping the Greenwich Land Trust. But we do all of this to basically try and recreate a productive, healthy ecosystem for the whole Long Island Sound area. And this is how we do it. We have a number of strategies. We use legal actions. We enforce environmental law, such as the Clean Water Act, through citizen suits. If there's a pollution issue, we have testing capabilities. We do a lot of negotiating to get those cleaned up. We have a fantastic water monitoring program that's in 40 bays and harbors with 24 citizen groups. That's what these orange sections are. We have an amazing green infrastructure team or ecological restoration team that does everything from dam removal to allow the anadromous fish to pass up, to installing rain gardens and bioswales, which I'll talk about in a little bit. I mentioned climate action, and then of course they lead the beach cleanups, which is very relevant to what we're doing here at the virtual beach cleanup kickoff. So plastic generally is a regional issue. So if you throw something on the ground, it washes into the river, it typically ends up on a local beach. Now, our watershed actually extends all the way up to Quebec, so it's conceivable that someone driving a car flicking out a cigarette butt, it rains, that cigarette butt ends up in the river, could end up on your favorite beach in Long Island Sound, because it is, as Richard said, all connected by water. But even though it seems daunting, I just like to start the show with that we can solve this problem. Diversity of funding, of course, is important to do initiatives, but more importantly, we need to have good, strong policy and industry practices that focused on squeezing off the flow of all this trash and litter that ends up on our beaches and in our rivers. And one of the concepts that I'll touch on later on is this idea of a circular economy, where you design in regenerative action on the landscape instead of strictly extractive, and you design out the waste. And anything produced through that goes around and around and gets reused or recycled, which leads me to the last one, the 4Rs. And basically what that is what we can do, what we should do as individuals, because really that's all society is a collection of individual actions. So the 4Rs are refuse. If you don't need this plastic item, don't buy it. If you do need some of it, try and buy less of it. That's the reduce. So refuse, reduce, reuse it. I like to take those peanut butter jars that we get and clean them out, and I put my nails and different screws and different things in there and keep them in my shop. And then recycling, of course, is important. It's last because it's the most energy consumptive of them all. You have to collect the recycled materials, process them, and then distribute them back out for remanufacture. But I will say trash doesn't stay regionally always. This is a quick story I'm going to tell about my years in Alaska, where I did about 8 years of beach cleanup for the city and borough of Yakutat. And we had good data. And then one year, all these floats showed up in buoys. And it was right after the Fukushima tidal wave and the meltdown there with the nuclear reactor. We gathered all this. There was Japanese writing on the buoys. So we called up NOAA and said, hey, we're getting stuff. And they said, no, you shouldn't see it for about another year. But this stuff blew over the top of the ocean in a very short amount of time. And how we knew for sure that it was from Japan is that we found this volleyball, and we had a Japanese television show, NHK, it's a station, it's comparable to our public broadcasting station, PBS. They translated it for me. I gave them the ball, and they brought it back to Japan and gave it to the owner, who was the name of a girl or a high school student on this ball from a tournament they had done in Fukushima. And this ball was actually on her grandfather's mantle when the wave came. And they never did find him, but when that ball came back to her from our beach cleanup, she felt it was a message from him coming back to her. It was a pretty powerful moment that they filmed. So I just want to state that, you know, plastic pollution is a global problem, but we really need to focus regionally through these cleanups and other methods. And the other thing that's hard to remember is that a lot of it's unseen. I'm going to talk about microplastics in a second, but this is my last Alaska slide. I was a marine mammal responder up there, stranding responder for many years. And I was told about a sperm whale, flew up to do a necropsy, and I saw this plastic webbing on its lower jaw. It was a plastic trawl web, probably from a fishing boat. I can't say that's what killed the plastic, killed it, but the next day it washed back out to sea and no one ever saw it again. So there's a lot of interactions with our trash going on that we don't see. So it's best to prevent it in the first place. And the one that we don't see that's very common is microplastics. You've probably been hearing a lot about this. It's generated through various manufacturing, household waste, litter, the sewage treatment plants I'll talk about in a moment, but this is what it looks like. So I did a series of manta trawls a couple years ago in front of Bridgeport, and you see a little yellow piece here that's part of a plastic rope. Here's a microbead. These were very common in manufacturing for lotions and other things. And my predecessor, the original Long Island Soundkeeper, was instrumental as a state legislator getting a phase out of these, and it's been banned in many products. He did a lot of work also at the federal level. So, okay. So that's the small stuff. But how do we get that small stuff? Big stuff. So we need to stop the big stuff from coming in as well. This is a bioswale. This is something that was installed by Save the Sound. And if you can imagine rainwater coming down here with cigarette butts and empty bottles and cans and sweeping into this bioswale and getting captured. And then as crews come by to maintain the plants, they can pick up the trash. So that prevents that stuff from going down the storm drain into the creek and then out to our beaches. They also look pretty nice too when you have a cement-dominated landscape. If it does get in the rivers, then another option is to intercept it in the river. This is a band-along litter trap. It's an Australian design. Another counterpart of mine, the Potomac River Keeper, has installed 2 of these around Washington, D.C. and maintains them. They're collecting a lot of bottles. Bronx River Alliance has a boom in the Bronx River that captures a lot. It's a different design. And we have some places in Connecticut that we may want to use this. This is Bruce Brook, which is between Bridgeport and Stratford, kind of the border, and it's just full of trash that blows in from playgrounds of volleyball and cups, and I've seen oil cans in there. So Representative Joe Gresco from the Bridgeport Stratford area is organizing a group of people to get it cleaned up, and it may be a good place to try out one of these for the first time in Connecticut. But what we do, and what is the focus of this talk is tonight, is just virtual cleanup. So in the past, we've done coastal and inland cleanups, river cleanups for a few years. We started collecting data the last 3 years, and we have 73 cleanups that were done in 2019. So we had over 2,500 volunteers. That's a lot of people. And you can see all the different stuff. We break it down into what we collected. And it's important to do this so you can track any policy changes. So once plastic bags are banned, in 5 years, what's this number going to be? The other thing that's important with this is that you get the kids involved. So this is important to get the stewardship and that mindset installed at a young age. I remember I grew up in the 70s, and there was all kinds of teachers teaching us about pollution. And I don't know if many of you remember some of those movies they used to show us about how the future could look if we didn't clean things up. So the beach cleanups give us a lot of information, and those trends are really important. So one good thing is most plastics are on the decline. But tiny plastics, those microplastics, or that'll break down to even smaller pieces, are on the rise. And cigarette butts are just incredibly numerous. We find those absolutely everywhere. So when you see people driving down the road and they flick a cigarette butt out the window, you end up having that rain take that cigarette butt down into a storm drain, say off the highway, into a tube, into a stream, and then out to the beaches. So we're starting to see some evidence that the plastic awareness is reducing this. I just want to call out specifically polystyrene bans, because next year I can guarantee you there's going to be legislature introduced through the Environment Committee in Connecticut to ban polystyrene. And why we need to ban polystyrene, aside from its greenhouse gas in the processing, and it's a hydrocarbon product, is that there's growing evidence that it condenses toxins. And so when these toxins are condensed and then it breaks into little pieces, it can then enter the food chain. It can get picked up by phytoplankton, then zooplankton, on up to fish, and eventually up to us when we catch and eat that fish. So we have had good success with bag bans before the COVID-19 virus hit us, both in Connecticut, New York, and Vermont, which all have waters that drain into Long Island Sound. Hopefully we get back to that. I know there's been a little bit of setback for safety issues. People are using plastic bags again. There are some developments in compostable plastic bags. We haven't seen evidence yet that they're working unless you have an industrial composting facility. So if it gets thrown out into the environment, does it really break down? So we're working on that. And that brings us back to this concept of the circular economy. So is that plastic bag really useful in a circular economy? Or you can go back to the old Coca-Cola model, which is still used in Central America, where there's a bottling plant. They put the soda in a bottle. They have distribution like the spokes of a wheel. They go out to the stores, people drink it, the stores send the bottles back to the plant, they clean them, they roll them. You can see those roll markers on bottles down in Central America, fill them back up and ship them back out. That would be one example of the circular economy. Another one is you could powder that glass and use it in cement mixing. And I just saw a study last week that said 6 tons of powdered glass used in the production of the regular Portland cement will reduce the greenhouse gas emissions of that process by 1 ton. So finally, we've got to support our leaders that have strong ocean policy. This is Senator Murphy, and he's got a bill called Healthy Oceans 2.0. Among many other things that it does, it drastically increases the research and funding available for marine debris to look at problems and how to solve those. I'm going to wind up here. I have one more slide after this, but I just want to reiterate that why do we do this? Why are people on this presentation right now? Why do I do the work that I do? And Richard does the work he does. It's because we share the planet not just with each other, but we also share it with all other life forms. Now, this is a Laysan albatross chick that was fed a Bic lighter and some styrofoam, some other things, and it died. Now, this is a live one. When I worked on Kauai, a friend of mine was in charge of protecting the Laysan colonies, and they're incredibly trusting of humans. They don't have there's no impact when you show up there. It's an amazing thing. It's almost primordial. And this is my son, and at one point, all the adults, about 11 of them, got up and formed a circle around him and my wife and started clacking their beaks and dancing and waving their necks. and they gave us a show for about 5-10 minutes, and they walked back to their chicks. It was quite a powerful moment. So just to recap, what we can do, the 4 R's: refuse, reduce, reuse, recycle. Innovate in the circular economy, either whether we're manufacturers or we're patrons or consumers. Try and choose products that are not designed to be obsolete and end up in the trash pile. And what this is all about is join our beach and river cleanups. That's direct action. There'll be a lot of like-minded people helping out. We do have some undersea cleanups, obviously. Support any single-use bans. Show up at your council meetings, write commentary, show up to testify at the state legislature. If you are interested in finding more about green infrastructure, rain gardens, bioswales, Save the Sound website's a great resource for that. If you have a river you think is a good candidate to test out an interceptor, let us know. Keep an eye on stormwater management issues, which delivers all that trash, and put filters on your washing machines. That's a big one for microplastics, is putting filters on the washing machine. That will really reduce your waste. And support the leaders, our political leaders, our local leaders who are trying to find solutions to these problems. And with that, any questions?